Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We welcome you to the California Climate Investments webinar series, webinar for nonprofits. This webinar is going to be geared towards sharing current and upcoming funding opportunities with you all that nonprofits are eligible for. As a quick note, this is part of a series, with the next webinar being the local governments webinar to occur on the 9th of December. And then all future and past webinar materials, including recordings and PowerPoints, can be found on the CCI website. I'd like to start off by introducing myself. My name is Cristina Echeverria, and I am an air pollution specialist here at CARB, and I will be your guide through the presentation today. So this webinar was really a collaboration between the Strategic Growth Council, Brightline Defense, and the Trust for Public Land. And we have three great speakers with us today. You'll be hearing from Kiran Kumar, Eddie An, and then Edna Ruinas. Before jumping into the funding opportunities, I really wanted to take a moment and give a little bit of context about the land that we are inhabiting as Californians. And in recent times, collaboration between tribal nations and the state has grown, and fortunately continues to grow. But it's really important to acknowledge that each area of California's history has brought different atrocities against tribal peoples, including land dispossession, discrimination, cultural impacts, and loss of life, to name only a few. To this day, many tribes continue to mobilize to preserve their culture and fight for restoration of their rights and lands while forging new roads towards equity and autonomy. This trajectory reminds us that the march towards justice is at times fraught with long chapters of struggle. Tribal nations and all federally recognized and non-recognized indigenous people in California have been sustainably managing lands for generations and are in a unique position to offer insight on ways to protect the environment. We thank the tribes for the knowledge they create and share, and will work to uplift their efforts to protect, implement, and build upon traditional ancestral ecological knowledge and practices for the betterment of all California. We invite our audience to engage with and interrogate present and potential impacts towards Indigenous self-determination and assess what opportunities there are to learn from history and not only integrate, but prioritize following the lead of our tribal neighbors. As the Executive Director of Walk Sacramento, a CCI sub-awardee, Kiran worked to build collaboration between public health and community development professionals in the Sacramento region to inform strategies that improve quality of life and access to opportunity in historically disadvantaged communities. So take it away, Kiran.
Thank you so much, Christina, and thanks everybody for joining this call and taking the time to learn more about these programs and these opportunities. Like Christina said, my name is Kiran Kumar, and I am the program manager for a team at the California Strategic Growth Council, or SGC, called Community Assistance for Climate Equity, and then some folks have shortened that to CASE. SGC as an organization is a cabinet level state organization under the governor's office dedicated to healthy, thriving, resilient communities for all. We're pretty well known by folks for our larger grant funding programs like the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program or the Transformative Climate Communities, or TCC, program. But we also provide significant technical assistance and capacity building services to under-resourced communities throughout California to help them effectively apply for and implement projects as well, recognizing that folks, to be able to access state funding resources, a lot more investment must go into forming local partnerships and reducing barriers within the application process. Today, I'm going to spend a little time talking about our technical assistance efforts generally, things to keep in mind for those who want to be funded to provide technical assistance, and then things to keep in mind for those who want to receive technical assistance. And then finally, I'll close with a new capacity building program geared towards nonprofits that we're really excited to be launching this month. Next slide, please. So we recognize at SGC that not all communities have the same resources and capacity to effectively compete for climate change investment, or CCI, funding. To overcome some of those challenges, we work within our programs as well as with other funding programs at other state agencies to provide technical assistance or TA services to potential applicants. TA is the provision of third-party services to support communities to do a number of different activities, usually around applying for or implementing grant projects. Though it includes the word technical, TA is not limited to highly technical activities, only like quantifying greenhouse gases. Technical assistance can also include public engagement, planning, and other aspects that we know to be critical for communities to effectively put forward community-led projects. It's also important to note that TA is not universally available, but is really dependent on the program itself. So for example, some programs offer technical assistance no matter what to anyone who needs it. Some offer it specifically to certain communities of highest need, and some programs at the state don't offer technical assistance at all just yet. Also, the scope of technical assistance often varies depending on the kind of funding program it is. So that all isn't to discourage folks from seeking out technical assistance from the state, but it is to encourage you to reach out to my team or to others at the state to develop a better sense of what kind of technical assistance is available. We're also working on developing more streamlined platforms to let folks outside of state government really understand and know about the TA offerings on a more consistent basis. And so this might look like a platform where folks can see what grant programs under CCI are currently offering technical assistance. So while the primary goal of the CCI TA program is to support communities in applying for climate change investment projects, this can seem at first pretty specific only to climate projects and climate funding. However, much of the technical assistance offered is around partnership building, community engagement, visioning, and project development that can help communities apply to different funding sources, build collaboration that informs long-term efforts, and then develop projects or strategies for pursuing funding on a longer-term basis. We often find that it's nonprofit organizations and communities that are instrumental in actually alerting their local jurisdiction partners to available technical assistance from the state, often enabling applications that would not have otherwise been possible. And so why it's really important for us to be joining this webinar today to help you communicate to other partners within your communities what available technical assistance opportunities there are, or at least how to find out more information about technical assistance so folks can actually feel like there's support in applying for some of these often complicated grant programs. Next slide, please. So I'll start with mentioning information for those who may be interested in providing technical assistance. So in many cases, TA is structured as third-party contracts with private organizations and nonprofits to provide the TA throughout the state. We often have local nonprofit organizations or regional nonprofit organizations apply as part of a team to provide TA, and we are always looking for diverse teams that better reflect the communities that ultimately would be served. Requests for proposals or RFPs are regularly posted online and can be accessed through Cal eProcure, and I'll drop a link to that in the chat, or I'll have the webinar organizers share those links. I also encourage folks who are interested in providing technical assistance to create an account with Cal eProcure so that it streamlines your ability to find available requests for proposals. We also regularly at SGC post TA funding opportunities on our website at www.sgc.ca.gov. And then finally, we have a LinkedIn networking group for those who are interested in forming teams or coordinating with other TA providers, and I've linked to that in the slide here. In terms of eligibility to provide technical assistance, nonprofits need to be registered with the Secretary of State and have an active status with good standing, which is pretty standard. Orgs are also encouraged to register their small business with the Department of General Services, which can benefit you when you're bidding on solicitations, as there are often small business and disadvantaged business preference points within RFP scoring. And then finally, we encourage folks to sign up as vendors with the CMAS system for any procurement opportunities that are applicable to you. And then again, I will link these in the chat and work with the web organizers or the webinar organizers to share. Next slide, please. So next, I'd like to mention that in some cases, nonprofit organizations are eligible to receive technical assistance. This is usually in conjunction with larger efforts with multiple organizations in partnership with local agencies when they're pursuing or going after funding. So like I mentioned earlier, the best way to learn about TA availability is to reach out to contacts for specific funding programs as early as possible, or reach out to us at the Strategic Growth Council to put you in touch with the right folks. Like I said earlier, we're trying to make TA much more consistently available across these CI programs and make that information more available to folks. And then TA can include anything from capacity building services, which include awareness building, partnership development and planning, to application assistance that includes grant writing support, and then finally implementation assistance that includes support to actually move forward certain elements of a funded project. And so to be eligible to receive technical assistance, you may not have to be within the process of writing an application for a grant, but there may be opportunities for capacity building technical assistance that actually happens outside of a grant window. Again, reach out to us to learn more about TA availability, or to the specific contact for a grant program to learn about what technical assistance is offered and what forms of that technical assistance would be available to you in your organization. Next slide, please. So I recognize that what I've shared so far doesn't have too much in the way of details on immediate opportunities. This is again because technical assistance is often tied closely to the funding programs and funding availability, which tends to shift from month to month with different programs being open. So again, either reach out to the specific funding program contacts or us at SGC to learn more about available technical assistance. I am excited, though, to share one opportunity that we have just made available that is specifically geared towards nonprofits. Partners Advancing Climate Equity is a new capacity building and technical assistance program for frontline community leaders, which launched earlier this month on November 5th. The program will bring together a cohort of 20 community leaders who represent a diversity of organization types, topic areas of focus, and regions to participate in facilitated trainings, peer networking, and other capacity building activities. The program is built around kind of two phases. One phase being truly like a peer learning cohort. Some have described it as a leadership development cohort. I like to think about it as more leadership harnessing. And then the second phase of the program is much more place-based technical assistance to address priority efforts of folks within the cohort. And the reason we structured it this way is that in our experience, a lot of kind of capacity building programs and peer learning cohorts, they sometimes lack the follow through of actually supporting folks implementing elements of the curriculum and the takeaways in their own communities. And so we want to actually provide on the ground support to folks to either build capacity within their community, pull together coalitions of partners to address specific topics, or potentially even apply for programs that may become available. So we expect the time commitment for the program to be around 15 hours a month, including some regular business hours. We hope that the skills and support gained through the program will support folks within their communities as well as their organizations. But we also plan to support participants by offering up to $8,000 to support participant costs in the program and developing community needs assessments. Applications are due December 3rd, and more information can be found at partnersadvancingclimateequity.org. It's also worth noting that we expect this to be a pretty competitive program, but we will be offering resources like the curriculum, resource library, and other guides to anyone who's interested, because we feel a major commitment to ensuring that the resources that are developed around this program are available to as many of folks who need access to them as possible. So I know I've gone a little bit long on time, but I will stop there and then turn it back to Christina. Thank you everybody for having me. And like I said many times throughout this presentation, please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or my team to learn more about both technical assistance opportunities in terms of providing TA or receiving it. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Karen. As a reminder, we will be holding questions that are submitted for the Q&A session later in the presentation, but we encourage everyone to please submit their questions as you have them so that our team can organize them and have them ready for the QA session for you all. With that, I'd like to now invite a Community Air Grants grantee to speak with us about his application process, the best practices he learned, as well as the lessons that he wished he had known when entering the application process. So I would like to introduce you all to Eddie An from Brightline Defense, Executive Director of Brightline Defense, which is an environmental justice nonprofit based in San Francisco. Prior to being a nonprofit attorney, he worked as an after-school programmer in Oakland, Chinatown, teaching art and public speaking for elementary students. Currently, he serves as a commissioner for 3 government agencies related to the environment, and that includes the San Francisco Commission on the Environment, Bay Conservation and Development Commission, and the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. So with that, I'd like to invite Eddie to unmute himself and take it away.
Thanks. This is Eddie, and just confirming you can hear me, hopefully.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Excellent. So hello, everybody. Eddie An, Executive Director of Brightline, and I'll be going through basically picture-driven slides today to try to describe the application process behind our air quality monitoring program. Hopefully provide some good context in like how we set the table and spend a good amount of time trying to pursue this particular grant under Assembly Bill 617, AB 617, also known as the Community-Driven Air Quality Monitoring Program, administered by the California Air Resources Board. So you'll see some logos on the left that list our community partners like Community Youth Center, CYC, Central City SRO Collaborative, which I'll describe more in detail, and then our technical partner, Clarity, as well, who's part of this program. Next slide, please. And to just delve into the partnership a little more, so Brightline is a 501c3 organization. Our value add to the space is more about coalition building and then trying to think through programming through that model of working with other service providers in the field. We also do a lot of public policy work, which had helped a lot with this application process, and I'll describe a little bit more of that later. But to describe the other 2 organizations more in depth, Central City SRO Collaborative is a community organizing group. They are fiscally sponsored by a larger affordable housing nonprofit based in San Francisco. But their whole focus is organizing amongst single room occupancy hotels, also known as SRO hotels or SRO buildings, or just shorthand SROs. So these are buildings that are basically small rooms with shared common spaces and kitchens. Built at the turn of the century after the 1906 earthquake. And what it's become, it was largely designed for a blue-collar immigrant workforce, but it's become more of low-income to very low-income tenant housing, particularly in San Francisco. SROs exist in several major American cities, but in San Francisco, there are quite a few of them, particularly in the Tenderloin and South of Market neighborhoods. Community Youth Center, just to describe their work a little, they are a major education service provider based in San Francisco, and they serve largely Asian Pacific Islander communities, but across different neighborhoods of the city as well. Next slide, please. And then just getting into like the threshold questions that helped along our application process. So as I described already, a lot of our work is around community coalition building. So when we were thinking about the AIR grant process, we thought it from the context of like what partners, unique partners we could bring together to forge this program. And then, of course, we were shaped by the definitions mentioned earlier, which are, the disadvantaged communities definition, or DACs for short, as well as the low-income communities definition, and together that's combined as a priority populations definition that was put forward by CARB around the AB 617 program. So you can see on the left-hand side in the top left corner, for instance, a picture of myself talking to single-room occupancy SRO tenant leaders. There's a unique tenant leadership program embedded in the Tenderloin South of Market area, which were mapped as disadvantaged communities by the state of California. And it was describing basically potential technology we could use around air quality monitoring and assessing whether there was a need in the first place. And then the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see also discussion with youth leaders based at CYC's office. And this is in the Tenderloin itself too, where high school students were also trying to assess like the nature of air quality monitoring and the needs behind it. And on the right was a picture from earlier this year, right before the pandemic hit, where a number of the stakeholders came together. And it's not, of course, just the Community Coalition, but you have the California Air Resources Board represented on the left by Jose Saldana. You'll also have a number of representatives from the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, our regional air district, that's Oz and Joshua. And also you'll see a number of community partners as well, whether it's Central City SRO Collaborative again, CYC, and of course to recognize Clarity, that's Sean Wehera right next to the picture of Dr. Jackson in the back. You can see the inspiration for our nonprofit. Next slide, please. And then just mentioning our technical partner more in detail, I think will be important because obviously we don't have the capacity as a 501c3 to just create the hardware and figure out the actual specifics of air quality science. In fact, cheerfully, I often tell people, like, if you had told me I would be engaging in air quality monitoring and installation 2 years ago, I would have told you you're crazy. But, you know, to the city's credit, city and county of San Francisco's credit, they also thought through different private sector partners that could be potentially plugged into a project like this. And that's how we got to talking with Clarity and figuring out how these air quality sensors could be localized by neighborhood and then installed on specific poles throughout San Francisco to get at some of the policy questions, which is going to be the next slide. And so this just describes some of the policy research we had to do even prior to putting together our application. So we spent roughly, depending how you look at the policy issue too, like 4 to 6 months at least in doing in-depth research on each of these issues. So South of Market Tenderloin has close proximity to highways. They're bordered by major thoroughfares of San Francisco, so they face a lot of local traffic congestion. The financial district, which also is adjacent to these neighborhoods, has a huge concentration of diesel emergency generators. So we had worked with the air district to gather that permit application data and then map out where the diesel emergency generators were. And then of course, ongoing construction is a major thing. So this is a device, you'll see the picture located at Howard and 9th Street now that's located, and we just placed it across a construction site to see if there's measurable air impacts that we can measure. The San Francisco Planning Department, for instance, has a heavy interest in our air quality monitoring program just to see if it matches up with their theoretical modeling of air quality data. And finally, of course, is wildfire smoke, which is probably at the top of everybody's mind just because of how catastrophic it's been in California this year. Next slide, please. And then just the next slides will just be brief as they describe like, you know, the theory of the case and then the subsequent publicity that's come from installing the air quality sensors. You'll see, for instance, Daniela Cortez, our program coordinator, installing some sensors in the Tenderloin itself. That's myself on the right-hand side trying to do installation in a park, a green space of Tenderloin, just to try to figure out if, again, there are measurable air impacts in that particular street corner. KQED, the regional public station, of course, covered our efforts. Next slide. And then generally, we've also thought about leveraging the program in different ways, and particularly different monolingual communities of San Francisco. So San Francisco is a city that's 35% Asian Pacific Islander. At a minimum, it just depends how you do the math. But for us, like, it was really important to try to do language access, address language access issues through, for instance, talking about air quality in Chinese language press. Next slide. And then this is where the bread is baked at the end of the day. This was basically the work that we did over the last 3 to 4 weeks now in installing the sensors, probably a little longer, 2 months, I would say. And you can see it's going to be 19 sensors spread across 5 different neighborhoods. Next slide. And then, of course, the open air quality data map that gets at some of the key pieces of information that the public needs about air quality localized by neighborhood. Next slide. And then, of course, you can see different neighborhoods represented across this map as well, which hopefully portrays the breadth and depth of Clarity's network. And then, next slide. And then this isn't necessarily about the funding, state funding itself, but it is ways in which we're thinking to leverage the program for longer term picture kind of environmental policy analysis. So Stanford University built out a partnership with us over this fall where we were able to work with 5 different undergraduate students and work on things like air quality data analysis, Spanish language posters, and environmental outreach accordingly. Next slide. Next slide, please. And then this is just a screenshot of several meetings that we've had. Of course, the pandemic has changed the very nature of outreach itself, but you'll get a sense of the different coalitions that we build and the different meetings that we have been putting together since we were approved by, this program as a grantee, and then all the work done to date. Next slide. And that's pretty much it. It's this gives you a sense of our open data map again, and hopefully I'm looking forward to answering more detailed questions about the application process and how nonprofit grantees can work through it. I would say from a more general standpoint, we work to build a very big coalition around this program. So even at the start of the process, we're very intent on gathering by the end of it, we gathered over 70 individuals and organizations to support the program. And even now, currently, we're working with 6 different city agencies and continue to work with the Regional Air District to make sure this program is as robust as possible. And of course, the California Air Resources Board is kept in the loop of all our efforts. And that's it for my presentation.
Great, thank you, Eddie. So with that, I'd like to invite our urban greening grantee to come speak with us. And again, she'll be sharing about her application process and best practices and lessons that they learned during the process. I know we are running a little behind on time, so what we'll do is after Edna has finished speaking, I'll go ahead and put the slide up with all the contact information as all of our speakers turn on their cameras, and then we will transition to the Q&A, but that way we've given folks all the information that they need in case they have something that they have to hop into at 2:30, and know that the recording will be posted so you can come back and listen to the Q&A session later if you would like. So with that, I'd like to introduce Edna, who has been working with the Trust of Public Land since 2014 and is a project manager on the Los Angeles Parks for People team, concentrating on designing, funding, and constructing community-led parks and playgrounds in LA County. Edna graduated with a Master's of Landscape Architecture from Cal Poly Pomona with a thesis studying community gardens and community empowerment. She holds an undergraduate degree in horticulture from UConn and is a lead green associate. So Edna, I invite you to unmute yourself and take it away.
Hi everyone, just wanted to confirm that you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So like Christina said, I work for the Trust for Public Land. I am a project manager. We oversee the entire park development process from conception to public outreach and engagement, funding, working with city partners, the design process, and then finally construction. Our mission is to create parks and protect land for people, ensuring healthy, livable communities for generations to come. This looks like multi-benefit open space projects in neighborhoods that don't have current park space. Our vision is that everyone should have access to a high quality park within a 10-minute walk from their home. Next slide. So I'm gonna walk through one of our projects that we're working on right now that received urban greening funding from the California Natural Resources Agency. This program is funded through CCI. The project is Zamora Park in the city of El Monte, California, which is about 30 minutes east of Los Angeles. It is a park renovation. You can see in front of you a photo of the existing park. It was built in the 60s. A lot of the play equipment is outdated. There's a big fence that runs in the middle of the park that creates sightline barriers and a giant unusable space that's locked most of the time. If you can go to the next slide. Over 15,000 people live within a 10-minute walk of the site, which is pretty dense. It's a large site. It's about 4.5 acres, which is, for us, it's a really big park space. We typically build smaller pocket parks on housing lots. So this is a really good sized park. The renovation was initiated by community members who wanted to see improvements at the park. They walked around the site to take a photo analysis of things that they wanted to see improved, like deteriorating benches, old play equipment, and they also showed photos of nearby parks that had features that they would prefer or that they thought worked really well and would like to see in their community park. They also presented to the city council their photo study and worked with the Parks Department to get the project started. Planned amenities based on that feedback is a splash pad and new playgrounds, walking paths. There's currently no walking paths through the site, so adding spaces that people can walk different routes throughout the park and exercise. An open field for youth sports and passive recreation, picnic areas, and improved lighting. Next slide. This is the site plan that we submitted with our urban greening grant proposal that shows all of those amenities laid out on the site. Next slide. Components of our urban greening grant will include native or drought-tolerant plant species, 112 new trees throughout the site, approximately 61,000 square feet of turf that will be converted into planting areas that will need little water once established. And then the project will also capture and infiltrate stormwater through the use of bioswales, which are depressed areas that water can collect, and it's filled with plants that can help infiltrate and slow down the water flow. And then gravel infiltration beds, which help to just percolate and hold water underground and let it percolate over time, and then permeable surfaces and pavers. Next slide. So just a few lessons learned and things that we look through or do when we're applying for programs like this is to first review the grant guidelines really thoroughly, read through all of the materials that are provided. They all are really helpful. Also, attend any technical assistance workshops that are available. A lot of times they'll walk through those grant guidelines and really explain things along the way. Look closely at what are eligible and ineligible expenses. For instance, for this urban greening grant, it won't pay for playground or splash pad equipment. So we're looking for we have other funding sources that will pay for that, and we are using the urban greening grant to pay for the parts of the project that it can fund. Also look at any pre-construction cost caps. A lot of times grants will have a cap on how much of the grant you can use for consultant costs or anything that happens previous to starting construction. Define the project scope early on. Just having everything set will help you move through the grant process or the proposal process much more efficiently rather than having to change things after you've already written things. Also, ask questions. Depending on the grant, sometimes there's different questions that agencies can't answer. It's a competitive grant program, so a lot of times, or sometimes there's a cutoff into when you can submit questions, or there's types of questions that can't be answered. But a lot of times, they're absolutely more than willing to answer your questions and help you or direct you to resources that can be helpful. So really take advantage of that resource. Next slide. And then build partnerships with your city partners and other local community organizations. For us, that's really key because we don't hold any of our projects, once they're built, they become part of the city park system. And so having their buy-in, I set a timer for myself. Having their buy-in is really key. And then for this grant program in particular, leave a lot of time to work through and complete the greenhouse gas calculations. That can be the most technically challenging part of the grant. It's 100% doable. There's a lot of resources that are provided, so read through all of those really carefully and take advantage of all those resources that you can, but leave a lot of time for that. And then if you are invited to have a site visit for the program, invite all of your partners and community members to attend, but have planning meetings up ahead of time so that everyone is prepared, they know what they're talking about, and you can have a really seamlessly run site visit. Next slide. That is it for me. This is my contact information. So go out and build really great things, and best of luck to you.
Thank you so much, Edna. That was great. So with that, we're going to be transitioning to Q&A. I will put on our contact information and invite our panelists to start turning on their cameras, turning on their microphones, and we'll jump into the Q&A. But anybody who needs to hop off before we complete the Q&A can go ahead and take note of the information here to be able to contact our speakers. Okay, hi everyone. So with that, let me exit out of this and jump over to the Q&A document. So just a second. So we'd like to jump in and I'll ask Eddie the first question. And that is, can you tell us a little bit about, and anybody else can jump in to fill out the answer more if they'd like, but Eddie, could you tell us a little bit about what your experience was as a first-time applicant? What were some challenges that came up that maybe you didn't foresee, or challenges that you could see coming up for an organization that maybe has very limited capacity?
I think the first thing that came to mind was just reading carefully the guidelines of the grant and just realizing how extensive the application process was for this particular program. One of the things that stood out to us as an organization was they were looking for holes or underserved, maybe another way of framing it is underserved communities or not previously served communities. There had been a whole round of prior AB 617 grantees, for instance, and our organization has historically done a lot of work in other neighborhoods of the city, including Baby Hunters Point. But this was both a challenge and an opportunity for us to build a new coalition, particularly around South of Market and Tenderloin. Our office is located here, but we haven't necessarily done environmental work within these geographic boundaries. So that was like an initial thing, just trying to make the community coalition building match with the environmental policy piece, match with the legislative definition. Like making all that work together was a huge obstacle barrier to overcome.
Yeah. And we did have a question about both of these programs, and that's, do you anticipate any opportunities opening up for the community air grants or urban greening grants in the coming year? And so folks know the community air grants program will have funding available within the next year, and the timeline is being established currently. And the urban greening grant program will likely receive funding in the legislative year for the financial 2021 to 2022 year for future funding rounds. So all of that still remains to be seen. Next, I also wanted to answer a question. Well, I wanted to remind folks that these Q&As, that these slides and the recording will be posted, since we got a couple questions checking in on that. And then if you have not worked with the state before, do we need to register with California to be allowed to apply for a grant? And in general, no, you don't have to register with the state, but some grants do require you to be a 501c3 organization. There are no blanket requirements for any special registration with the state for first-time applicants, and please check out our website and the website of the program that you're interested in to see what the eligibility requirements are for that particular program. So next, I wanted to ask Eddie actually another question, and that's, how long does it take a normal nonprofit fund? How long does a normal nonprofit funding process take with CCI? So what was your experience with acquiring funding? What was that lag, and were there any things you were able to do to shorten that time?
I think we treated it like a part-time job, basically, and it was over the course of somewhere between 4 to 6 months to even research and gather all these information pieces to make for a credible application. Yeah, are there ways to make it easier? I will recognize, like, we have a good policy fellowship program at Brightline that was really essential in building out some of the research pieces. So for instance, like the permit locations I mentioned around diesel emergency generators, that was tracked down by policy fellow Isaac Ortiz at the time, who was really dedicated in just connecting with the right staff within the air district and pulling the actual data and then mapping it on Google Maps. Like, that all takes a significant amount of time. So yeah, I think it just depends on the organization's capacity for that and patience for that kind of thing. It's really challenging to put all together.
Of course. Okay. We have also gotten lots of questions about the impact of the legislature's decision to delay allocation of GGRF on 2021 funding opportunities, and we were asked what the outlook would be for the next couple of years. So I'll answer that on my end and then open it up to Kieran to see if you have any input to give on what does this mean for TA? Is TA affected? Is it not? So that folks know what to expect there. So while the legislature did not pass a comprehensive expenditure plan for GGRF in the most recent cycle, implementation of California climate investments programs continues to move forward. And so there's still millions of appropriated dollars that have yet to be implemented, and there are ongoing funding opportunities like all the ones that we've highlighted in this webinar. The timing for individual grant solicitation varies depending on each program. And so for each program mentioned, please visit the website and the program website and contact program staff for the latest information available. And we encourage you, really the most important thing is to make sure you're signing up for updates so that as soon as these programs become available, you have a really good shot of being able to put together a competitive application and are able to utilize the full time given. And then we expect programs that will continue implementing funds programs will continue to implement funds that they've already received, and that the legislature will consider new appropriations in their upcoming budget decisions.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. And I think you covered that very well. In terms of TA, many of the programs will continue to offer technical assistance because the funding for those TA programs were identified prior to this budget cycle. And so again, if there are questions about specifically a program that you're looking at in the TA available, reach out either to myself or to the program administrator listed there. And then I'll also mention, earlier in the presentation, I had mentioned interest in kind of creating more consistency within CCI programs to offer technical assistance. We're hoping to work with more state agencies to commit program funds to their technical assistance so that there is sustainability to technical assistance in parallel to program funding availability. So it is my hope that technical assistance continues to operate in tandem with the CCI programs moving forward.
Okay, great. And then Edna, I had a question about schoolyards, and I know that you had a different grant that dealt with schoolyards, and so I'm wondering if I could ask you, this attendee was wondering, are green schoolyards a part of the strategy to address heat and flood risk in California?
Yeah, so I didn't highlight it in my presentation, but we have applied for a number of projects to the urban greening program, and one of those projects is a green schoolyard that was funded. It's in Los Angeles, it's a charter school, and aspects of that design and that project are going to include trees, plantings, and light colored pavement paint to reflect heat, and all of those will help address urban heat island effect.
Okay. Great. I know we're getting some requests to share the contact slide again, so I'll do that now. And in the meantime, Eddie, we have a question for you, and that's wondering whether you're interested in expanding your project outside of SF, such as East San Jose.
Oh, yes. I'd be happy to chat. Please email me after this and we can talk about, and I would think generally the way Brightline approaches this work too is that it doesn't have to be a Brightline program at the end of the day. I'm very happy, just trying to build another organization and promote their work. I'm a big fan, for instance, of West Oakland Environmental Indicators project, which was also an inspiration for our own AB 617 program in many ways. And the cool organizing work that they've done out in West Oakland, I think it doesn't have to be exactly the same in each, jurisdiction, of course, but maybe it'll also inspire East San Jose as well.
Okay, great. I will have to remove the slide to be able to read through the questions, but again, the slides will be posted. So if you need this information, feel free to email us and we will send you the slides immediately after the presentation if you'd like, so that you have this contact information. So let's see, the next question. I wanted to answer folks asking me whether I could explain the official quantification methodology from the state. And so this answer has two parts of sort, and that really is that CARB plays, one role that CARB plays is in quantifying greenhouse gas reductions from programs. And so sometimes this is used by programs to influence what projects they select for funding, such as the case with the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities program. But then other times, the information really is more used internally to be able to then create a report on the overall benefits of the funds and then report that to the legislature. And information on that is available on our webpage. You can go to arb.ca.gov/CCI-resources, and feel free to let us know in the chat if you'd like us to link it. But the program staff are happy to answer any questions that you might have. So with that, I think we might have to cut questions because we're coming a little long on time here. But I want to encourage everyone who still has questions to please reach out to the programs directly. Please reach out to our speakers. You can reach out to CCI, and we will do the best that we can to coordinate you with the people that are best equipped to give you answers. So don't be shy. We are here to help. And we hope that you were able to be inspired by some of the programs that we were able to share with you today. So with that, just make sure that you are checking the CCI website. Remember that everything is recorded, everything will be up. Reach out to us, but again, the ADA compliant slides will be up within 48 hours. You can email us if you want the slides more on a quicker timeline. And then the video will be up within a week. So make sure to follow us at CA Climate Invest on social media. And I'd like to thank our speakers again for joining us. And thank you all for spending the time with us and visiting and joining us for this webinar. I will now ask our speakers to turn off their cameras and remute themselves. And I will put the contact slide up as people are exiting in case folks still want that information. And thank you all so much.